A house forgotten by time. A doll forgotten by death. This is the cursed doll. In the hollow heart of autumn, where the fog never lifted and the crows seemed to circle without landing, there was a town named Renfield, a place so small even maps seemed to forget it existed. On its outskirts stood an old Victorian house, peeling and crooked, swallowed halfway by ivy and silence. For 30 years, no one had lived there. People said it belonged to the Mercer family, once respected, now whispered about. The kind of name people lower their voices for when they tell stories in bars after midnight. But to Evelyn Marsh, it was just a house. A cheap one. And that was enough. Evelyn was 32, a woman whose life had quietly fractured without anyone noticing. Her mother had died in spring. Her engagement had collapsed by summer, and now autumn felt like the only season left that made sense because at least everything else was dying too. She moved into the Mercer house with little more than a suitcase, her mother's old locket, and the dull hope that silence could heal what heartbreak had broken. For the first few days, silence was all she had. No footsteps but her own. No echoes except the wind crawling through the chimney. Until the 8th night. At precisely 2:17 a.m., a soft click came from the ceiling like wood settling, but too deliberate. She told herself it was the house breathing. But when she rose to check, she found the attic door open. She was sure she had closed it. The air up there was cold enough to bite. Boxes slumped under cobwebs. Dust floated like ash in the thin beam of her flashlight. And then she saw it. A white sheet, draped over something in the corner, faintly rocking. The sound of wood creaking, rhythmic, back and forth. She lifted the sheet. Underneath sat a doll, about 2 feet tall, porcelain-skinned, with a cracked cheek and hair the color of straw soaked in rain. Its glass eyes stared past her shoulder, reflecting nothing. A faded blue dress hung limply around its tiny frame. The rocking chair moved once more on its own. Evelyn froze, her breath fogged in the cold. On the chair's arm was a carving, rough and childlike. To Clara, forever mine. She whispered the name under her breath. Clara. It echoed softly through the attic, like the house remembered it too. When she carried the doll downstairs, the air seemed to sigh, as though releasing something. She placed it on the living room mantel, telling herself she only wanted to fill the empty space. That night, her dreams turned strange. She saw a little girl in the attic, sitting in the same rocking chair, brushing the doll's hair. The child never looked up, never spoke, but hummed a melody that looped endlessly, 3 notes over and over again. When Evelyn woke, the doll was no longer on the mantel. It sat in the window, facing the woods. A chill slid through her. She picked it up, heart trembling with anger more than fear. "Who's playing games with me?" she muttered to no one. But there was no one to answer. That night, she locked the doll in a trunk. But the next morning, the trunk was open, and the doll was sitting on the kitchen table. A cup of tea poured beside it. The teapot was still warm. Evelyn's hands shook as she lifted it. The teacup had lipstick on its rim, her shade. Outside, the fog thickened. The trees leaned closer to the house, as if listening. And somewhere above, in the attic, came the faint sound of a child humming that same song from her dream. 3 notes, over and over. Clara was awake. This is only the beginning. The doll has opened its eyes, and the past has begun to remember itself. The house no longer slept. At first, Evelyn thought it was the wind, the way old houses groan when they remember their age. But soon she realized it wasn't the wood that was breathing. It was the silence, shifting, stretching, listening. Each night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., a soft humming began. 3 notes, always 3. Sometimes, it came from the attic. Sometimes, it came from behind her bedroom wall. Once, it came from directly beside her ear. Evelyn stopped using the attic altogether. She sealed it shut with duct tape and nails. But the sound still found her. On the 3rd night, she woke to find a note on her nightstand, written in a child's handwriting. "Don't leave me alone." Her throat tightened. The paper smelled faintly of dust and rosewater. She tore it in half, threw it into the fireplace, and watched it curl and blacken. When she looked down, there was another note already lying at her feet. "You're burning the wrong thing." The whisper came after, soft, trembling, and almost kind. "Evelyn." She froze. Her name had never sounded so small. From then on, the whispers became part of her days like an echo behind her thoughts. Sometimes she heard laughter in the pipes, faint giggles from the vents, or the sound of tiny feet scampering across the ceiling. The townsfolk began to notice her exhaustion. The grocer asked if she was unwell. The pastor offered to bless the house. Evelyn smiled politely, said she didn't believe in ghosts, and went home to whisper back to one. She tried recording the sounds. Nothing but static. But if she turned the volume all the way up, she could almost hear breathing under the hiss. And in one file, only one, a voice said, "It wasn't me." She played it again and again until the words began to sound like her own. One evening, the power went out. The town was swallowed in black, and the only light in her house came from the old oil lamp she'd found in the basement. She sat by it, hugging her knees, when she heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming down the stairs. "Who's there?" she whispered. The footsteps stopped, then tap, 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 3 soft knocks at the living room door. Evelyn's voice cracked. "Clara?" The lamp flickered. She didn't open the door, but something brushed her arm, cold and weightless, like the air had taken shape. The scent of rosewater filled the room again. And in the corner, the doll sat facing her this time, its cracked cheek glimmering faintly in the light. A single tear rolled down Evelyn's face. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. Silence. Then, a voice not in her ears, but inside her skull, like a memory she didn't remember making. "I want to go home." The words echoed through her bones, and for a moment, Evelyn saw something flicker behind her eyelids. A little girl, crying in the rain, clutching her doll, staring at a burning house. She gasped and fell back, knocking over the lamp. The flame died, plunging everything into shadow. And in that blackness, the voice spoke again, softer, this time. "You took my home." By morning, the doll was gone. Only its dress remained folded neatly on the rocking chair in the attic, though the door was still nailed shut. Evelyn stood there, staring at it for a long time. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "I'm sorry." And the house whispered back, "Not yet." The morning light was pale, thin like it had forgotten how to be warm. Dust floated in slow spirals through the air, glowing gold, then gray, then gone. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, staring into her coffee. It had gone cold an hour ago. She hadn't blinked much since sunrise. The doll was still missing, but somehow its presence filled every corner of the house, an invisible heartbeat that throbbed through the floorboards. She could feel it when she walked, like stepping across the pulse of something alive beneath her feet. On the wall across from her hung a mirror she didn't remember unpacking. The frame was carved wood, same design as the rocking chair upstairs. For a moment, she thought the reflection looked normal, until she saw the second shadow behind her. It moved when she didn't. I remember freezing, my breath locked in my chest. I told myself it was the light, just the light. But the longer I looked, the more I knew that thing standing behind me wasn't my shadow at all. She turned around. Nothing. When she looked back into the mirror, the shadow was gone, but her reflection smiled, a fraction too late. That was the first time Evelyn realized the house wasn't just haunted. It was aware. Every reflective surface, every window, every shard of glass began to distort her image in small, imperceptible ways. A tilt of the head that wasn't hers, a blink delayed, a mouth that opened, whispering things she didn't want to hear. At night, she began to avoid mirrors altogether. But they avoided her too, reflecting only the room, never her face. One evening, she found herself in front of the bathroom mirror, staring into the fogged glass after a shower. Her pulse echoed loud in her ears. She wiped the mirror with her hand. For a moment, there was only her own pale face. Then, a whisper behind her ear. "Don't turn around." Her reflection's lips moved, but she hadn't spoken. The lights flickered, and for the briefest second, the reflection wasn't Evelyn at all. It was a little girl, eyes black as coal, mouth wide in a silent scream. Evelyn stumbled back, her hand striking the counter. The mirror cracked from corner to corner, splintering her image into 100 trembling versions of herself. Each fragment blinked independently. I wanted to run. I told myself I could leave, just drive away, start over. But the thought came with another quieter, colder. What if the reflection came with me? What if it wasn't the house at all? What if it was me? That night, she dreamed of water. Dark, endless water. A little girl floating face down, her doll drifting beside her. The lullaby hummed from somewhere deep below the surface. When she woke, she was standing in front of the attic door, barefoot, her hand already on the doorknob. The door opened easily this time. The air that poured out was sharp and metallic, thick with the smell of rain and old paper. The mirror she'd seen before was waiting in the center of the attic floor, lit by the moonlight from the window above. But now, it was clean, spotless, as though something had wiped it from the other side. In its surface, Evelyn saw the doll again, standing behind her. She didn't turn around. She couldn't. Instead, she reached out, fingertips brushing the glass. The reflection shimmered, rippling like water disturbed by breath. Then the reflection spoke, in her own voice. "You're not me anymore." Her scream echoed through the house, ricocheting down the walls like the sound had been waiting decades to escape. When morning came, the mirror was shattered. Evelyn awoke on the floor, her hand bleeding from hundreds of tiny cuts. On her palm, scrawled in something faintly brown, were the words, "Look closer. Mirrors don't lie. They simply wait until you're ready to see." The days had begun to blend together. Evelyn could no longer tell where the mornings ended and the nights began. They both felt the same now, hollow, gray, heavy with waiting. The mirrors had stopped showing her reflection entirely. They showed the house instead, the hallway behind her, the furniture, the pale light, everything except her. She'd gotten used to it. Almost. But the silence was new. Not peaceful silence, but expectant silence. The kind that felt like holding your breath beside someone who might be crying. She heard it first on a Thursday. Faint, almost like wind through a bottle. A soft hum curling through the air, vents fragile, uneven, searching for rhythm. It wasn't the same 3 notes anymore. It was becoming something. I remember standing in the hallway, my hand on the wall. The sound was moving through the pipes, behind the drywall, inside the house's bones. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was memory. That night, the melody followed her into sleep. She dreamt of the sea-dark water, endless and cold, and a little girl standing barefoot on the shore, her doll in her arms. The girl hummed to herself, eyes fixed on the horizon where the moon hung low and red. Then, softly, the words came. "Sleep, my darling. Drift below, where the stars forgot to glow. Mother's gone, but you must stay. Keep the dark and fade away." Evelyn woke gasping, the final note still trembling in her ears, like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. The clock read 2:17 a.m. Again. Always 2:17. Her throat was dry, her hands shaking. She whispered into the empty room, "Clara?" No answer. But the air seemed to pulse with the last word of the song "Stay." In the morning, she found new cracks in the living room wall, thin, curling lines spreading outward like veins. And faintly, just beneath the plaster, the same 4 words scratched in tiny letters. "Sleep, my darling, drift below." Her stomach turned. She pressed her ear to the wall, and for a moment, she could swear she heard breathing. The days after the dream felt different. The house no longer creaked like it once did. It sighed. It breathed. And sometimes, when the wind swept across the old rafters, the sigh turned into a sound almost like humming. Evelyn didn't run anymore. There was a strange comfort in the melody now, like the way grief can sometimes feel warm when it's familiar. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that grief can echo if the house is empty enough. But the song, it didn't come from outside. It came from me. One evening, she sat at the piano she hadn't touched in years. The keys were yellowed, half the notes stuck, but the dust still smelled like music. She placed her fingers down gently, and then, without meaning to, she began to play. The tune came out exactly as she'd heard it in her dreams. The same rise, the same fragile fall. Her hands moved like they remembered something her mind had forgotten. Then she whispered the words she didn't know she knew. "Rest your head where moonlight weeps. Cradle tears the silence keeps. Shadows hush, and mothers pray for little souls that lost their way." The air changed. It grew thick, heavy, like the house itself was listening. And from somewhere upstairs came another voice, soft, trembling, young. It sang the next verse. "Ashes whisper, rivers moan. Sing me home, I'm all alone. Candle fade, the night will stay. Don't let the morning take me away." Evelyn froze, her hands hovering over the keys. Tears filled her eyes before she even realized she was crying. She whispered into the empty room, "Clara, is that you?" A cold breeze brushed her cheek, almost tender like a child's hand. And then, faintly, she heard it. A giggle, quick and distant, fading into the floorboards. The rest of that night was a blur. Evelyn wandered through the house, following the echo of that voice. It drifted through the halls, into corners where the light couldn't reach, into rooms that had always been too cold. When she reached the attic, the air felt different. Not cruel, not malicious, just sad. On the floor lay the doll again, its porcelain face cracked, one glass eye missing. But this time, it wasn't facing her. It was facing the mirror, the same mirror that had once refused to show her reflection. In the glass, she didn't see herself or the doll. She saw a small room lit by candlelight, a woman rocking a little girl to sleep. The woman hummed the same lullaby, her voice trembling. The little girl clutched the same doll. The scene flickered, the way old film burns when it's about to end. And then, Evelyn heard a whisper from within the mirror. She forgot the last verse. I don't know how I knew what to say next, but the words came out of me, soft as a prayer I'd been holding my whole life. "Sleep, my child. The storm will cease. Find in dark your quiet peace. Love once lost will find its way when hearts like ours forget to stay. As the final note faded, the mirror rippled the candlelight. Inside it flickered, and for the briefest heartbeat, Evelyn saw them both. The woman and the child, holding each other, smiling. Then they were gone. The attic fell silent. Only the faint echo of the song lingered, weaving itself into the air like dust refusing to settle. Maybe the song was never meant to haunt me. Maybe it just wanted to be remembered. The night after the mirror's light faded, the house finally fell silent. No creaks, no whispers, no songs. Only stillness, like the air itself, was holding its breath. Evelyn wandered from room to room, touching the walls with trembling fingers. The wood felt warm now, pulsing faintly beneath her skin, like a heartbeat too slow to belong to the living. On the piano, a single sheet of paper waited. She didn't remember placing it there. The edges were burned, the handwriting small and delicate. 4 words stood in the middle of the page. Remember me gently. I didn't feel fear anymore. Just this ache, deep, familiar, as if I'd lost someone I never met. Maybe that's what grief is. Loving a stranger who never got to say goodbye. That night, the dream returned. Only this time, Evelyn wasn't watching. She was there. The air smelled of rain and smoke. The walls flickered orange with firelight. She heard screaming a woman's voice and the crash of breaking glass. And in the corner of the burning room, a little girl clutched her doll. "Clara!" Evelyn cried, though the word didn't feel like hers. The child turned. Her face was streaked with soot, eyes wide and wet. "Mama's gone," she whispered. "The house took her." Then the world shifted, flames dimming into candlelight, smoke curling into mist. Evelyn stood now in a different room. The same attic, but whole, alive. The air glowed soft and golden. And there she was, Clara's mother, kneeling beside the same mirror, tears on her cheeks, humming the lullaby under her breath. Rest your head where moonlight weeps. Cradle tears, the silence keeps. The woman's voice broke halfway through the verse. She pressed her lips to the doll's forehead and whispered, "If I can't keep you safe in life, I'll keep you here, where no one can hurt you again." The mirror shimmered a slow silver bloom across the glass, and Evelyn felt it, the pull, the weight, the sorrow anchoring itself to the house. The mother's body faded, her reflection trapped within. Clara's cry echoed once, and then, nothing. Evelyn woke on the attic floor, her face wet with tears. Dawn filtered through the window, soft and gray. In her lap lay the doll, the crack across its cheek, now faint, almost healed. She whispered, "You weren't haunting me, you were waiting." The doll's head tilted ever so slightly, as if in agreement. It's strange how pain lingers not to punish, but to be understood. Maybe that's all ghosts are. Memories, desperate for kindness. She placed the doll on the windowsill, where the first light touched its porcelain face. The glass eye caught the sun and glimmered softly, like a tear that had finally learned how to shine. Downstairs, the piano keys pressed themselves once, slowly. One note, the first note of the lullaby, and for the first time, Evelyn smiled. Morning came soft and silver. The air inside the house felt lighter, like something vast had exhaled after a lifetime of holding its breath. Evelyn walked through each room slowly barefoot, silent, tracing her fingers over the walls that once whispered her name. The wood no longer pulsed beneath her touch. The mirrors no longer rippled. It was as though the house itself was sleeping, finally, after a century of waiting. On the piano, the doll still sat upon the windowsill, bathed in pale sunlight. Its crack had faded to a faint seam, a scar, not a wound. Evelyn approached, her footsteps echoing softly. I should have felt relief, but what I felt instead was quiet, the kind that comes after tears too empty to be peace, too gentle to be grief. She sat at the piano bench, hands resting on the keys. When she pressed the first note, it rang clear and warm, the same melody, but no longer haunting. Just sad, beautiful. Then, like a breath through old paper, a voice joined her. Soft, familiar. Clara's. Sleep, my child, the storm is gone. Morning waits, the dark is done. If you wake and find me near, hum my song and I will hear. Evelyn smiled through her tears. It's time, isn't it? She whispered. The doll blinked once. A single shimmer passed through its glass eye, and for a heartbeat, Evelyn saw them both again, the woman and the child, hand in hand, standing in a field of tall grass beneath the rising sun. They were smiling, and then they were light. The melody faded with them, leaving only the sound of wind against the window and the soft echo of one final note. When the silence came back, it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, like the house had learned to breathe without sorrow. She stood, walked to the door, and paused. The sunlight fell across the threshold, cutting a golden line through the floor. She looked back one last time. The mirror on the far wall caught the light and reflected it softly. No shadow, no figure, only the brightness of morning. Thank you, she whispered, for the song. The floorboards creaked just once, almost like an answer. Then, Evelyn stepped outside. The house behind her stood still and quiet, its windows bright, its walls no longer whispering. And for a moment, just a moment, a faint hum floated through the air. Rest your head where moonlight weeps. Cradle dreams the daylight keeps. The last line drifted away before it could finish. Evelyn turned her face toward the wind, eyes closed, and smiled. Some songs are never meant to end. They just find new hearts to remember them. And sometimes, what we call haunting is just love that stayed behind. You've been listening to Darkwing Horror, where stories end in silence, but echoes always remain.